Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human exploration ship Endeavour, staring at the strange signal coming from his communication panel. The signal was weak and broken, but he could make out voices speaking in different alien languages. All of them sounded desperate. "Lisa, are you getting this?" Jake called to his tactical officer. Lisa Grant looked up from her station, her face showing concern. "Yes, Captain. The signal is coming from Zarian Prime. That's the planet we were supposed to survey next week." Lisa adjusted her controls and the signal became clearer. "It sounds like a distress call, but it's in 3 different languages. Alterian, Krogan, and something else I can't identify." Pete Collins, the ship's engineer, walked over from his station. "Captain, I've been monitoring the planet's energy readings. There's something strange down there. The whole surface is covered by some kind of energy barrier, and it's been active for a very long time." Jake frowned. Zarian Prime was supposed to be an empty world, useful only for mining. The report said nothing about alien activity or energy barriers. "How long is a very long time, Pete?" "From what I can tell, maybe thousands of years. The energy signature is unlike anything we've seen before." Pete showed Jake the readings on his tablet. "And Captain, there are 3 ships trapped inside that barrier. They match the designs of the species we heard in the distress call." Lisa stood up and walked to the main viewing screen. "Captain, I think we need to investigate. If 3 different alien species are trapped down there, they might need our help." Jake nodded. The Endeavour was a small ship with only 12 crew members, but they were experienced explorers. Jake had been leading survey missions for 5 years, and his team had encountered strange situations before. However, this felt different. "Set course for Zarian Prime. Alert the crew that we might be dealing with something unusual." Jake sat back in his captain's chair. "And Pete, start working on a way to scan through that energy barrier. I want to know what we're dealing with before we get too close." The journey to Zarian Prime took 6 hours. During that time, the crew worked to understand the distress signals and the energy readings from the planet. Lisa discovered that the 3 trapped ships belonged to some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The Alterians were known for their incredible intelligence and problem-solving abilities. The Krogans were famous warriors who had never lost a battle. The Quantum Collective was a group of species that had mastered technology beyond anything humans had achieved. "Captain," Lisa said as they approached the planet, "if these 3 civilizations are trapped down there, what makes us think we can help them?" Jake understood her concern. Humans were still new to space exploration. They had only been traveling between stars for about 50 years, while these other species had been doing it for thousands of years. "Maybe we can help because we're different from them. Sometimes a fresh perspective is what you need." Pete looked up from the station. "Captain, I'm picking up more detailed scans now. The energy barrier covers a large structure on the planet's surface. It looks like some kind of ancient building, maybe a temple or fortress. Any signs of life?" Jake asked. "Yes, but it's strange. There are the life signs from the 3 alien crews, but there's also something else. Something very old and very powerful." Pete's voice was quiet. "Captain, I think there's someone down there who's been alive for a very long time." The Endeavour moved into orbit around Zarian Prime. The planet looked normal from space, with brown and gray continents and small blue oceans, but in the center of the largest continent they could see a massive structure surrounded by a dome of shimmering energy. "Take us down to the edge of the barrier," Jake ordered, "but keep our distance. I don't want to get trapped like the others." As they descended through the planet's atmosphere, the structure became clearer. It was enormous, built from black stone that seemed to absorb light. The building had tall towers and curved walls that created patterns too complex for human eyes to follow easily. The energy barrier around it pulsed with different colors, creating a beautiful but dangerous light show. "Captain," Lisa said, "I'm receiving a new signal. It's coming from inside the barrier. Put it on the main speaker." Voice filled the bridge. It was deep and ancient, neither male nor female, and it spoke in perfect English. "Welcome, humans. I am Keeper Zara, guardian of the Citadel of Trials. Your fellow travelers have been my guests for some time now. They came seeking knowledge, but they have found only frustration. Jake stood up. Keeper Zara, we received distress. Signals from the ships trapped in your barrier, are they safe? They are safe, but they are not free. They chose to enter my trials, and they cannot leave until they succeed or until they accept defeat and death. Zara's voice was calm, but there was something sad in it. The Alterians have been trying to solve my puzzles for 4 months. The Krogans have been attempting to conquer my challenges for 3 months. The Quantum Collective has been using their technology to break my tests for 2 months. All have failed. Pete whispered to Jake, Captain, the energy readings are off. The charts. Whatever this Keeper Zara is, she's incredibly powerful. What kind of trials? Jake asked. Trials that test the true nature of a species. Not their strength or intelligence or technology, but their character, their worthiness. Zara's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. For 10,000 years I have waited for someone to pass my trials. Many have tried, all have failed. Lisa looked at Jake with concern. Captain, maybe we should contact Earth Command. This sounds like something beyond our capabilities. But Jake was thinking about the trapped alien crews. 3 different species, all more advanced than humanity, all trapped for months while trying to solve Zara's trials. He imagined how desperate they must be feeling. Keeper Zara, Jake said, what happens if we try your trials? The same thing. That happens to all who try. You will face challenges that test your species' greatest strengths and expose your greatest weaknesses. If you succeed, you will gain knowledge that could advance your civilization by thousands of years. If you fail, you will join the others in waiting until someone finally succeeds. And if no one ever succeeds? There was a long pause before Zara answered, then we all wait forever. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in Zara's voice that suggested she had been waiting for a very long time, and that the waiting was as much a prison for her as the barrier was for the trapped ships. Captain, Pete said quietly, the alien ships are sending U.S. messages. They're warning us to stay away. They say the trials are impossible. Jake looked at his crew. Lisa was checking her weapon systems, ready for anything. Pete was studying the energy readings, trying to understand what they were dealing with. Both of them looked worried, but they also looked determined. We can't just leave them trapped down there, Jake said. If there's a chance we can help, we have to try. But Captain, Lisa said, if the Alterians, Krogans, and Quantum Collective couldn't pass these trials, what makes us think we can? Jake smiled grimly. Maybe that's exactly why we can pass them. Maybe Zara's trials aren't looking for the strongest or smartest species. Maybe they're looking for something else entirely. He turned to face the communication panel. Keeper Zara, on behalf of humanity, I request permission to attempt your trials. Permission granted, Captain Morrison. Welcome to the Citadel of Trials. I hope you prove more interesting than your predecessors. The energy barrier opened just wide enough for the Endeavor to pass through. As they descended toward the ancient structure, Jake wondered what they were getting themselves into. But he also wondered about Keeper Zara, who had been testing species for 10,000 years, and sounded very tired of waiting. The Endeavor landed softly on a platform made of the same black stone as the Citadel. Jake Morrison looked out at the massive structure that rose above them like a mountain. The walls were covered with symbols that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. Stay close together, Jake told his crew as they left the ship. We don't know what we're walking into. Lisa Grant checked her weapon one more time. Captain, the energy readings are even stranger now that we're inside the barrier. It's like the whole place is alive. Pete Collins carried a bag of scanning equipment. The technology here is beyond anything I've ever seen. The stones themselves seem to be generating power, but I can't figure out how. As they walked toward the Citadel's main entrance, 3 groups of aliens approached them. Jake recognized the different species from the intelligence reports he had studied. The Alterians were tall and thin, with large heads and pale blue skin. Their eyes were enormous and seemed to hold great intelligence. The Krogans were shorter but much stronger, with thick armor-like skin and powerful muscles. The Quantum Collective. Representatives looked almost human, but their bodies flickered slightly as if they existed in multiple dimensions at once. An Alterian stepped forward. Humans, I am Senior Analyst Vex. We have been monitoring your communications. You should. Leave immediately. These trials are not meant for your species. A Krogan warrior growled. I am Battle Commander Throck. We have fought for 3 months and gained nothing. Your small ship and tiny crew will not succeed where we have failed. The Quantum Collective representative spoke in a voice that seemed to come from several places. At once, I am Node 7. We have calculated the probability of success for your species. It is less than 1%. Jake looked at the 3 groups. All of them appeared tired and frustrated. Their clothes were worn and their equipment showed signs of damage. How long have you been trying the trials? The Alterians have been attempting solutions for 123 days, Vex replied. We have tried every logical approach, every mathematical possibility. The trials do not follow rational patterns. Throck hit his fist against his palm. We have tested every battle strategy known to our people. We have tried force, speed, surprise, and endurance. Nothing works. We have used quantum computers, probability engines, and reality manipulators, Node 7 added. The trials adapt to counter every technological approach we attempt. Before Jake could respond, the air around them began to shimmer. Keeper Zara materialized in front of them, her form shifting between energy and something more solid. She was tall and graceful, with features that seemed to blend characteristics from many different species. Her eyes were ancient and held a sadness that made Jake's heart ache. Welcome, humans. Are you ready to begin your trials? Zara's voice was gentle but carried immense power. We're ready, Jake said, though he felt anything but ready. Then follow me to the Chamber of First Understanding. Zara led them through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were covered with artwork that showed different species attempting various challenges. Jake noticed that many of the pictures showed beings that looked defeated or confused. They entered a vast circular room with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness. In the center of the room, hundreds of crystals floated in the air. Each crystal was a different color and pulsed with its own light. The crystals moved in slow, complex patterns that hurt to watch for too long. Your first trial is the harmony of elements, Zara explained. You must arrange the crystals so that their energies create perfect balance. When you succeed, the path to the second trial will open. Jake studied the floating crystals. What happens if we fail? Nothing happens. You simply try again. But be warned, every species that has attempted this trial has eventually given up in frustration. The Alterians calculated over 4 million possible combinations. The Krogans tried to force the crystals into position. The Quantum Collective built machines to predict the correct arrangement. All failed. Lisa stepped forward. Captain, maybe we should observe the crystals first before we try anything. Good idea. Jake turned to Zara. How much time do we have? All the time you need. Time moves differently here. Zara's form began to fade. I will return when you have succeeded or when you wish to surrender. After Zara disappeared, the 3 alien groups approached the humans again. Vex shook his large head. You are making a mistake. We have studied these crystals for months. There is no pattern that creates harmony. We tried every combination of force and strategy, Throck added. The crystals resist all attempts to control them. Our quantum analysis suggests the trial is designed to be impossible, Node 7 said. The crystals exist in a state of controlled chaos. Jake looked at his crew. What do you think? Pete was already scanning the crystals with his equipment. The energy patterns are definitely complex, but there's something else. The crystals seem to be responding to our presence, not just our actions. Lisa sat down on the floor and closed her eyes. Captain, I think we need to approach this differently. Instead of trying to solve it immediately, maybe we should just watch and learn. The aliens looked confused. Watch and learn? Vex asked. We have been watching for months. But were you really watching, or were you just looking for patterns to exploit? Lisa opened her eyes. Sometimes the best way to understand something is to stop trying to control it. Jake sat down next to Lisa. Pete, put away your scanners. Let's just observe. Pete looked reluctant but packed away his equipment. The three humans sat quietly in the center of the room, watching the crystals dance above them. The aliens watched the humans with growing confusion. This is not a strategy. Throck muttered, this is just sitting. Perhaps that is the point, Vex said thoughtfully. We have been so focused on solving the puzzle that we have not truly observed it. As the humans continued to watch, Jake began to notice something the aliens had missed. The crystals weren't just moving in random patterns. They were responding to the emotions and intentions of the people in the room. When the Alterians became frustrated, certain crystals pulsed with harsh light. When the Krogans grew angry, other crystals flared with aggressive energy. When the Quantum Collective focused their technology, the crystals seemed to fight against their influence. Lisa, Jake whispered, I think the crystals are alive. Not intelligent like us, but aware of what we're feeling. Lisa nodded. I noticed that too. When I stopped trying to figure them out and just appreciated their beauty, some of them began to glow more softly. Pete had been watching a cluster of blue crystals near the ceiling. Captain, I think this trial isn't about arranging the crystals at all. It's about learning to harmonize with them. Jake stood up slowly. What if the trial isn't testing our ability to solve problems, but our ability to work with something we don't understand? The aliens had been listening to the humans' conversation. Vex stepped forward. You believe the crystals require cooperation rather than control? That's exactly what I think, Jake replied. But not just cooperation, understanding, respect. Lisa approached one of the floating crystals carefully. Instead of trying to grab it or push it, she held out her hand and waited. The crystal drifted toward her palm, its light becoming warmer and brighter. It's working, Pete said excitedly. The crystal is responding to Lisa's intentions, not her actions. One by one, the humans began to interact with the crystals. They didn't try to force them into position or calculate their movements. Instead, they approached each crystal with patience and respect, allowing the crystals to respond naturally. The aliens watched in amazement as the crystals began to form new patterns around the humans. The harsh, chaotic movements became gentler and more flowing. The different colored lights began to blend together instead of fighting each other. Impossible, Node 7 whispered. The crystals are achieving harmony. As the last crystal found its place in the pattern, the entire room filled with beautiful, peaceful light. The crystals sang together in a harmony that touched everyone present. Even the aliens, who had been frustrated for months, felt a sense of peace they had forgotten was possible. Zara reappeared, and for the first time, she was smiling. Congratulations, humans, you have passed the first trial. But I must warn you, the second trial will be much more difficult. Jake looked at his crew and the aliens around them. What makes it more difficult? The second trial will test your ability to win without defeating your opponent. Many species have found this concept impossible to understand. As Zara spoke, a new doorway opened in the wall. Beyond it, Jake could see what looked like an arena. We're ready for whatever comes next. But privately, Jake wondered if they really were ready. The first trial had taught them that Zara's challenges required completely different thinking than what most species were used to. If the second trial was harder, what would it ask of them? The second trial chamber was unlike anything Jake Morrison had ever seen. As soon as he stepped through the doorway, the world around him changed completely. He was no longer in the citadel, but standing on a hill overlooking a vast city. The city was beautiful, with tall spires and flowing gardens, but something was terribly wrong. The sky was dark red and strange storms moved across the horizon. The buildings were cracking, and Jake could see people running through the streets in panic. This was a world that was dying, and its people were desperate. Welcome to the trial of impossible choices, Zara's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Before you lies the civilization of Asteria. They have 7 days before their world ends. You must save them, but every solution you choose will create new problems. The Alterians, Krogans, and Quantum Collective have all tried to save Asteria. All have failed. Jake looked around and saw his crew members, Lisa Grant and Pete Collins, appearing beside him. Behind them, the three alien groups materialized as, well, everyone looked confused by the sudden change in environment. This is a simulation, Vex the Alterian said, studying the dying world below them, but the complexity is remarkable. Every person down there has their own life, their own problems, their own desires. Throck the Krogan warrior pointed at the storms in the distance. Those are not natural storms. Something is causing them. We must find the source and destroy it. Node 7 from the Quantum Collective flickered slightly. Our analysis indicates multiple cascading system failures. The planet's core is unstable, the atmosphere is poisoned, and the social structure is collapsing. Jake walked to the edge of the hill and looked down at the city. He could see families huddled together in doorways, children crying, and adults arguing about what to do. The sight made his heart heavy. What did you three groups try to do? Jake asked the aliens. Vex replied first. We calculated the most efficient way to save the maximum number of people. We designed evacuation plans and resource distribution systems. But when we implemented them, they caused riots because people didn't want to leave their homes. We tried to impose order, Throck said. We created military structures to force people to follow survival protocols. But the people rebelled against our control, and civil war broke out. We attempted to use technology to fix the planet's problems, Node 7 added. We built machines to stabilize the core and clean the atmosphere. But the technology created dependencies that made the people helpless, and when our systems failed, the situation became worse than before. Lisa looked at Jake with concern. Captain, it sounds like every solution they tried just made new problems. That's exactly right, Pete said. This isn't really a test about saving the planet. It's a test about understanding when not to interfere. Jake studied the scene below them more carefully. The people in the city were scared, but they were also working together. He could see groups forming to share food and water. People were helping their neighbors and taking care of children who weren't their own. Even in the face of disaster, the people of Asteria were showing kindness to each other. What if we're looking at this wrong? Jake said, what if the trial isn't about saving them from the disaster, but about respecting their right to face it? In their own way, the aliens looked at Jake with confusion. You would let them die? Vex asked. No, I would let them live, Jake replied. There's a difference. Jake walked down the hill toward the city. His crew followed him, and reluctantly so did the aliens. As they got closer to the people, Jake could hear their conversations. They were scared, yes, but they were also making plans. Some were organizing food distribution. Others were caring for the sick and injured. A few were even singing to keep spirits up. Look at them, Lisa said softly. They're not giving up. They're not waiting for someone else to save them. They're trying to save themselves, Pete nodded. And look how they're doing it. They're not fighting each other for resources. They're sharing what they have. Jake approached a group of Asterian people who were organizing supplies. They were small, humanoid beings with gentle faces and large eyes. When they saw Jake and his group, they didn't ask for help or beg to be saved. Instead, they offered to share their food. We don't have much, one of them said, but you're welcome to eat with us. Jake was amazed. These people were facing the end of their world, and they were still showing hospitality to strangers. Thank you, he said, but we're here to help if we can. Help is always welcome, the Asterian replied. But we understand if you can't save us. We've lived good lives, and we're facing the end together. That's what matters. Jake felt tears in his eyes. These people had already found their own way to deal with the disaster. They had chosen to face it with dignity, kindness, and unity. Any attempt to save them would take that choice away from them. Vex, Jake called to the Alterian. When you tried to evacuate them, did you ask if they wanted to leave? Of course not, Vex replied. Evacuation was the logical choice for survival. Throck, when you imposed military order, did you ask if they wanted your protection? They were in chaos, Throck said. They needed structure whether they wanted it or not. Node 7, when you used technology to fix their problems, did you ask if they wanted to be dependent on your machines? The technology was clearly superior to their methods, Node 7 answered. It would have been cruel to let them struggle. When we could help, Jake looked at each of them. But you took away their choice. You decided what was best for them without asking what they wanted. Lisa understood what Jake was getting at. Captain, the trial isn't about saving them from the disaster. It's about respecting their dignity as thinking beings. Exactly, Jake said. The real test is whether we can accept that sometimes the best help we can give is to let people make their own choices, even if we don't agree with those choices. Pete walked over to a group of Asterian children who were playing a game despite the chaos around them. Look at this, he said. They're still being children. They're still finding joy even in the face of disaster. If we tried to save them by forcing them to evacuate, we'd be taking away their last days of childhood. The aliens began to understand. You're saying that saving them might actually harm them, Vex said slowly. I'm saying that taking away their choice to face their fate with dignity is a form of harm, Jake replied. These people have found meaning in their final days. They've chosen to spend them showing love and kindness to each other. That's not something we should interfere with. Throck looked uncomfortable, but we have the power to save them. Doesn't that create an obligation to act? Having power doesn't always mean we should use it, Jake said. Sometimes wisdom means knowing when not to act. As Jake spoke, the world around them began to change. The red sky grew lighter, and the storms in the distance started to calm. The people of Asteria continued their activities, but now they seemed more peaceful, more content. You're passing the trial, Note 7 observed. The simulation is responding to your approach. Jake realized that the trial was ending not because they had saved the people of Asteria, but because they had learned to respect the people's right to face their challenges in their own way. The disaster was still happening, but it was no longer a tragedy. It had become a story of dignity and choice. Zara appeared among them, and her expression was different now. She looked surprised and perhaps a little hopeful. No one has ever passed the trial of impossible choices by choosing not to interfere. Most species cannot resist the urge to impose their will on others, even when they believe they're helping. Sometimes, the best help is just being present, Jake said. Not trying to fix everything, but just being there to witness and support. The simulation faded and they were back in the Citadel. The aliens looked at the humans with new respect and confusion. I don't understand, Vex said. How's letting people die a victory? We didn't let them die, Lisa explained. We let them live as they chose to live, right up until the end. That's completely different, Zara nodded slowly. You begin to understand. The nature of my trials. They are not tests of capability, but tests of wisdom. The third trial will be even more challenging. It will test whether you can recognize when your greatest strength becomes your greatest weakness. Jake looked at his crew and the aliens around them. Each trial was teaching them something important about themselves and about how different species approach problems. He was beginning to suspect that the trials weren't just about testing them, they were about teaching them. We're ready for the third trial, Jake said, though he wondered what new challenge awaited them. Are you certain? Zara asked. The third trial has broken the spirits of many who thought they were prepared. Jake looked at the aliens who had been trapped here for months. They had started these trials with confidence in their abilities, but now they looked uncertain and tired. Whatever was coming next would test them all in ways they couldn't imagine. We're ready, Jake repeated, hoping he was right. The third trial chamber was different from the others. It felt smaller and more personal, though Jake Morrison couldn't explain why. The walls were made of smooth white stone that seemed to glow with its own light. In the center of the room stood a simple chair, and behind it was a mirror that reflected not their appearances, but something deeper. This is the trial of necessary sacrifice, Zara announced as she materialized beside the chair. Each species must give up what they value most to proceed. But be warned, the sacrifice must be real, and it must come from the heart. Jake looked at the 3 alien groups that had been trapped here for months. All of them appeared more tired than before, and there was something broken in their expressions. Vex the Alterian stepped forward first. We have attempted this trial many times. Each time, we calculated what would be the most logical thing to sacrifice. We offered our databases, our knowledge, our technologies. Nothing was accepted. Throck the Krogan warrior nodded grimly. We offered our weapons, our armor, our battle strategies. We even offered our lives in combat. But the trial rejected every sacrifice we made. We attempted to sacrifice our advanced technology, our quantum computers, our reality manipulation devices. Node 7 from the Quantum Collective added. Nothing we offered satisfied the requirements of the trial. Jake studied the chair and the strange mirror behind it. What exactly are we supposed to sacrifice? That which defines your species above all else, Zara replied. That which makes you who you are. The Alterians could not sacrifice their intellectual pride. The Krogans could not sacrifice their warrior honor. The Quantum Collective could not sacrifice their technological superiority. Lisa Grant walked closer to the mirror and gasped. Instead of seeing her reflection, she saw herself as others might see her, not just her appearance, but her role, her identity, her sense of purpose. Captain, this mirror shows who we think we are. Pete Collins joined her at the mirror. It's showing me my identity as an engineer, my pride in fixing things, my need to understand how everything works. Jake approached the mirror and saw himself. As a leader, a protector, someone who took responsibility for his crew and his mission. He saw his confidence, his determination, and his belief that humans could find solutions to any problem. I think I understand, Jake said slowly. The other species couldn't pass this trial because they couldn't give up the very things that made them feel superior to others. But Captain, Lisa said, if we give up what makes us human, what do we become? Before Jake could answer, the trial began. The chair in the center of the room started to glow, and suddenly Jake found himself sitting in it. He hadn't walked over to it, he was simply there, as if the trial had chosen him to go first. Images began to appear in the air around him. He saw his crew, his ship, his mission to explore new worlds and help humanity expand into the galaxy. He saw himself making difficult decisions, leading his people through dangerous situations, taking responsibility for their safety. What do you sacrifice, Captain Morrison? Zara's voice came from everywhere at once. Jake felt the weight of the question. What defined humanity? What made them different from the other species? As he thought about it, he realized that each of the alien species had defined themselves by their greatest strengths. The Alterians by their intelligence, the Krogans by their warrior culture, the Quantum Collective by their technology. But what if those very strengths were also weaknesses? What if the need to always be the smartest, the strongest, or the most advanced actually prevented them from connecting with others? I sacrifice humanity's need to be special, Jake said quietly. The aliens looked confused. What does that mean? Vex asked. Jake continued, his voice growing stronger. I sacrifice our pride in being problem solvers. I sacrifice our belief that we can fix everything. I sacrifice our need to prove that we're worthy of being in the galaxy alongside more advanced species. The images around Jake began to change. Instead of showing him as a leader and hero, they showed him as simply a person, flawed, uncertain, sometimes afraid, but also caring and willing to admit when he didn't know something. You would give up your species' drive to achieve greatness? Throck asked, sounding almost offended. No, Jake replied. I'm giving up our need to prove our greatness. There's a difference, Lisa suddenly understood. Captain, you're sacrificing our ego. The part of us that needs to feel superior or special? Or worthy, exactly, Jake said. What if our greatest strength isn't our intelligence or our technology or our fighting ability? What if it's our willingness to admit that we don't have all the answers? Pete nodded. Our willingness to ask for help, to learn from others, to accept that we might be wrong? As Jake spoke, the chair began to glow brighter. The trial was accepting his sacrifice, but something strange was happening. Instead of taking something away from him, The sacrifice seemed to be giving him something back. "I understand now," Jake sighed, looking at Zara. "The sacrifice isn't about losing part of ourselves. It's about giving up the parts that prevent us from connecting with others." Zara's expression changed. For the first time since they had met her, she looked surprised. "You see the true nature of sacrifice. Most species believe that sacrifice means loss, but true sacrifice means choosing what matters most." The trial chamber began to shift around them. The walls became transparent, and Jake could see beyond them to other chambers, other trials, stretching out in all directions. It was then that he realized the full scope of what Zara had been doing for 10,000 years. "You've been testing species after species, waiting for someone to understand," Jake said. "But it's not just about the trials, is it? You're trapped here too." Zara's form flickered, and for a moment she looked less like a cosmic guardian and more like someone who was very, very tired. "I am bound to continue the trials until someone proves worthy of inheriting the knowledge I protect." But after 10,000 years, I had begun to believe that no one would ever understand. "What knowledge?" Lisa asked. "The understanding that true strength comes not from what you can do to others, but from what you choose not to do. The wisdom to know when to act and when to wait. The courage to be vulnerable instead of always trying to be strong." Jake stood up from the chair, and the images around him faded. "How many more trials are there?" "Only one," Zara replied. "But it is the most difficult of all. In the final trial, you must face me directly. Every species that has reached this point has tried to defeat me through their greatest abilities. The Alterians tried to outsmart me. The Krogans tried to overpower me. The Quantum Collective tried to outmaneuver me with technology. And they all failed because they were still trying to prove their superiority," Jake realized. Yes, they could not see past their need to win. Jake looked at his crew and the alien groups around them. The aliens were watching him with a mixture of confusion and hope. They had been trapped here for months, and for the first time, they were seeing someone make real progress through the trials. "What happens if we fail the final trial?" Pete asked. "The same thing that happens to all who fail," Zara said sadly. "You remain here until someone eventually succeeds or until you choose to give up and die. And what happens if we succeed?" Zara was quiet for a long moment. "If you succeed, you will free not only yourselves and the other trapped species, but you will also free me from my 10,000-year guardianship." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Now he understood the true weight of what they were facing. This wasn't just about proving human worth or rescuing the alien crews. This was about freeing an ancient being who had been trapped in her duty for longer than human civilization had existed. "We accept the final trial," Jake said. "Are you certain?" Zara asked. "In the final trial, you will face the full extent of my power. I will not hold back because I cannot. The trial demands that I test you with everything I have." Jake looked at Lisa and Pete. Both of them nodded without hesitation. "We're certain." "Then follow me to the arena of final truth," Zara said. "There, you will either prove your worthiness or join the countless others who have tried and failed." As they walked toward the final chamber, Jake wondered if he truly understood what they were about to face. But one thing was clear: the final trial wouldn't be won through force or intelligence or technology. It would be won through something much simpler and much more difficult: the courage to see Zara not as an opponent to be defeated, but as a person who needed to be freed. The arena of final truth was the largest chamber Jake Morrison had seen in the Citadel. The ceiling stretched so high that it disappeared into darkness, and the walls were made of black stone that seemed to absorb all light. In the center of the arena was a circle marked with symbols that glowed with pale blue fire. Jake walked into the arena alone, leaving Lisa Grant and Pete Collins with the three alien groups at the entrance. He had insisted on facing this trial by himself, though. He wasn't entirely sure why. Something told him that this was how it had to be. "You may bring your crew," Zara said as she materialized across from him. But now she looked different. Her form was larger, more imposing, crackling with energy that made the air itself hum with power. All previous challengers brought their full teams to face me. I know, Jake replied. But I think that was part of their mistake. Around the edges of the arena, Jake could see the ghostly images of other beings who had faced this trial before. Tall Alterians with their calculating eyes, powerful Krogans in battle armor, flickering forms of the quantum collective with their reality-bending technology. All of them looked defeated, their faces showing the despair of failure. State your challenge, Zara commanded, her voice now carrying the weight of cosmic authority. How will your species prove its worthiness to inherit the guardianship of galactic wisdom? Jake looked up at Zara's towering form. Every species before him had answered that question by showcasing their greatest abilities. The Alterians had demonstrated perfect logical strategies. The Krogans had displayed ultimate warrior techniques. The Quantum Collective had revealed their most advanced technologies, but Jake had learned something from the previous trials. He had learned that sometimes the most powerful action was the one that others didn't expect. I don't want to prove our worthiness, Jake said quietly. Zara's energy form flickered with surprise. What did you say? I said I don't want to prove our worthiness. I'm tired of proving things. Jake took a step closer to Zara. You've been testing species for 10,000 years. You've seen the best that the galaxy has to offer. The smartest minds, the strongest warriors, the most advanced technologies, and none of them were good enough. That is correct, Zara said, though her voice sounded less certain than before. But what if the problem isn't that they weren't good enough? What if the problem is that they were all trying to be good enough for someone else instead of just being themselves? Jake took another step toward Zara. The alien groups watching from the entrance held their breath. This was completely different from any approach they had tried. For 10,000 years, you've been alone in this citadel, testing people who want to prove they deserve your knowledge. But has anyone ever asked you what you want? Zara's energy form began to fluctuate more violently. I want someone worthy to take my place. No, Jake said gently. That's what you're supposed to want. That's what your duty requires you to want. But what do you actually want, Zara? What would make you happy? The question seemed to hit Zara like a physical blow. Her towering form wavered, and for a moment, Jake could see through the cosmic energy to the person trapped inside. I want to rest, Zara whispered. I want to stop testing people. I want to stop being responsible for guarding knowledge that no one seems ready to receive. Jake nodded. How long has it been since someone asked you how you're feeling? No one has ever asked me that. That's wrong, Jake said, and his voice was filled with genuine anger. You've been doing this impossible job for 10,000 years, and no one has ever checked to see if you're okay? That's not right. Zara's form was shrinking now, becoming less imposing and more human in size. The trials must continue. The knowledge must be guarded. I am bound by ancient laws. Who made those laws? Jake asked. The ancients. The beings who came before all current civilizations. Are they still around to enforce those laws? Zara was quiet for a long moment. No, they have been gone for millennia. Then maybe it's time to make new laws. Maybe it's time to choose what you want to do instead of what you're supposed to do. Jake was now standing just a few feet away from Zara. Her energy form had condensed into something almost human in appearance. She looked tired, so very tired. I don't know how to stop, Zara said. I've been the guardian for so long, I don't remember who I was before. You don't have to remember who you were before, Jake said. You can choose who you want to be now. He held out his hand to her. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Zara stared at his outstretched hand. You would help me? Even though I have tested you, challenged you, put you through trials that could have killed you. Of course I would help you. You've been trapped here for 10,000 years. You've been lonely and tired and carrying a burden that no one should have to carry alone. Jake's voice was gentle but firm. And more than that, you've been waiting for someone who cared enough to see that you're a person, not just a test to be passed. From the entrance to the arena, Jake could hear one of the Krogans mutter, "This is not a battle strategy. This is madness." But Vex the Alterian spoke up. "No, I think I understand. He's not trying to defeat her. He's trying to save her." "But the trials," Node 7 from the Quantum Collective said. "The ancient laws, the guardianship of knowledge. Maybe some laws are meant to be broken," Lisa Grant called out from where she stood with Pete Collins. "Maybe some systems are meant to be changed." Zara looked at Jake's hand for a long moment, then slowly reached out and took it. The moment their hands touched, the entire arena began to change. The dark walls became lighter, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the ghostly images of failed challengers faded away. "I accept your help," Zara said, and for the first time in 10,000 years, she smiled. The arena dissolved around them, and they found themselves back in the main chamber of the Citadel. But now the chamber was different. Instead of cold stone, it was filled with warm light. Instead of intimidating symbols, it was decorated with images of different species working together. "The trials are ended," Zara announced, her voice now free of the cosmic authority it had carried before. "Not because you passed them, but because you showed me that they were never necessary in the first place." The three alien groups looked around in amazement. The energy barriers that had trapped them for months were gone. Their ships were free to leave whenever they chose, but what about the knowledge you were guarding? Vex asked. Zara gestured to the walls around them, which now showed scenes of cooperation and understanding between different species. The knowledge was never in the trials themselves. It was in learning to care for each other across the boundaries of species and culture. "You mean the real treasure was the friends we made along the way?" Pete asked with a grin. Jake laughed. "Something like that. But more than that, it was learning that sometimes the most important thing you can do is ask someone if they're okay." Throck the Krogan warrior looked confused. "So we were trapped here for months because we never thought to ask the Guardian how she was feeling. You were trapped here because you thought you had to prove you were worthy of something instead of recognizing that everyone is worthy of compassion and help," Jake explained. Zara nodded. "The humans succeeded not because they were stronger or smarter than you, but because they were willing to see me as a person who needed help rather than an obstacle to be overcome." Over the following days, the alien ships prepared to leave Zarian Prime. Each species had learned something important from their experience in the Citadel. The Alterians discovered that intelligence without empathy was incomplete. The Krogans learned that true strength sometimes meant offering comfort instead of fighting. The Quantum Collective realized that the most advanced technology was useless without human connections. Zara chose to leave with the humans aboard the Endeavor. After 10,000 years of cosmic responsibility, she wanted to experience simple mortality and the companionship of people who saw her as a friend rather than a guardian. As the Endeavor departed from Zarian Prime, Jake stood on the bridge watching the planet shrink behind them. Zara stood beside him, no longer glowing with cosmic energy, but looking remarkably human. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Jake asked, breaking 10,000 years of tradition. "I think we did the necessary thing," Zara replied. "Sometimes the most important change starts with someone brave enough to ask if the old ways are still working." Lisa Grant looked up from her station. "Captain, we're receiving messages from all over the galaxy. Word is spreading about what happened at the Citadel. Other species want to learn about this human approach to problem solving. What should we tell them?" Pete asked. Jake smiled. "Tell them it's simple. When you meet someone new, don't ask what they can do for you. Ask how they're doing and if there's any way you can help." It was, Jake thought, the most human response possible. And perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed.